Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt, and I am here once again with my partner in crime, Eddie Ekwo, to go through what has been another chaotic week in the NFL as the playoff picture is beginning to heat up. Eddie, my friend, we don't celebrate it, but happy Thanksgiving weekend.
Happy Thanksgiving weekend as well. Listen, I did actually treat myself to turkey, over the weekend, as you do. I just didn't do what Jake Ferguson and the Cowboys did by stuffing their hand into the turkey and running around with it. But I did have a good old slice of turkey, as I enjoyed what the NFL produced on the Sunday, and it was very good. I liked the weekend, of course, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons why, the weekend was great. But it was a good weekend. Enjoyed it.
I bet you did, and it started off strong for you. Well, I'll tell you what, rather than skip through the pleasantries that we normally look, let's just get straight into the action, because I know you are chomping at the bit to talk about this. And you said it was a good weekend. Well, for you, it started good on Thursday, on Thanksgiving Day itself. And we said last week that this game had potential to be one of the highest watched regular season matches of all time. And for those who didn't tune in, for those who did tune in, who happened to have stars on their clothing, we're not disappointed. We are, of course, talking about the Dallas Cowboys beating the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving Day, 31-28 in the end. So we're just going to steamroll straight into Cowboys corner. I'm not going to ask any questions about this because I don't really think there's much point. I will just ask you one. Eddie, did you enjoy that game?
Did I enjoy it? It was beautiful, beating the imposter Americans team that everyone has been latching onto, the Kansas City Chiefs. Listen, the America's real team stood up. Well, the real American team stand up, and the Cowboys team did exactly that. This game was beautiful. It was perfection. It was like it was one of those classical rendition that you can kind of, like a Mozart type, performance. That is what the Cowboys did. It started rocky. First couple of plays, Dak Prescott throws an interception, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is the Chiefs. Mahomes, sitting out there, what's he gonna do? And of course, Mahomes comes in, matches straight down, touchdown. And you're thinking, okay, here we go again. This might be one of those days where things doesn't go right. But that was it. I think Dak Prescott was like, let me get the interception out of the way early. Let's just get it out of the system. And now let me just settle down. It's one of the, have you ever watched this TV show called Spartacus? It's based on Roman history and all of that. And usually the gladiators, right, when they go into on the gladiator arena, they'll get out people and then they'll fight. And then there is always a guy. There was one of the gladiators that would tease the crowd, take a few punches from some of the guys, get a few cuts. And then afterwards, when they think that, the guy has been defeated, he just gets up and then he says, shall we begin? This was exactly what Dak Prescott did.
So I've got to say, Eddie, that out of all the analogies that I thought you would use for this game, I didn't think an overly erotic Roman history series of Spartacus would be high on the list. But let's also make one thing clear, because I love Roman history. I'm a bit of a history buff, and I've also seen Spartacus as well. You do not watch it for the gladiators. If you tell me you were watching that program for the, I would be concerned.
I mean, it was action. There was a lot of action.
Well, there's definitely a lot of action. There's definitely. I do kind of feel like some of those scenes is kind of like what it is like walking around in an NFL locker room, though.
It probably is.
But maybe a little bit less swearing, and maybe a few bit too much male genitalia. But anyway, we have digressed, and I'm blaming you for this.
Digressed massively.
Well, there's a short for us to get up on the site.
Yeah, so listen, the Cowboys settle in, they settle into the game, and then you know Josh Pickens has obviously been, one of the players of the Cowboys this season. He's been the story, right? But what I love is how both Josh Pickens and CD Lamb are able to share the spotlight. One week one person goes off, the next week the next person goes off, and they're complementing each other. Everybody talks about complementary football, defense, offense, special teams, but even in the wide receiver room, there's complementary football that can be happening. It's a lot to be said about another team in our division that don't know how to do complementary football. But I'm not. Let's stay on.
We'll come on to them. We'll
We'll
come
come on to that. But listen, the Cowboys played a very efficient game. And as soon as we got into the second quarter of the game, you saw the Cowboys defense starting to show who they really are. It's something that they've shown in the last couple of games where they kind of settle into a rhythm, work out what the other teams are doing, and then they start to close it down. They were getting pressure upon pressure on Mahomes, got him down a couple of sacks, as well. And basically, they couldn't cover CD Lamb. McDuffie, who is supposed to be one of the best cornerbacks, in the league, it was just drawing defensive pass interference after defensive pass interference, in that game. CD Lamb, was absolutely amazing. And Dak Prescott was composed. But you've got to give credit to the Cowboys defense and talk about peaking at the right time. If there was a time for you to sort out all your problems and your worries, it's down in December going into the stretch. And the Cowboys did that. I think that this game, shows what the Cowboys have always been teasing that they are capable to do. The offense from the start of the season, have been putting up numbers like this. But the defense was just terrible. And it was always like, if this defense can just elevate themselves from the floor, just get up from the floor and at least stand up. Nobody's asking you to jump high or anything, but just stand up, as a defense. This team could be dangerous. And we're seeing exactly that against the Cowboys. Cowboys did brilliantly. It was a desperate game for both teams because, it was win or go home. It literally was. And Cowboys stood up on the biggest stage of them all. And do you know what I really love about this, game, other than the win? I think it was for Dak Prescott because, for a long time, people have always talked about Dak Prescott shrinking, when the stage gets very big. And it doesn't get any bigger when you play a Super Bowl, perennial champions. Patrick Mahomes, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the whole world, and then you go out there and you show that you are competitive, you are comparable to Patrick Mahomes. And I know the stats may drift slightly towards Patrick Mahomes, but the eye test tells you that Dak Prescott played exceptionally well in that game against a team that have had the experience of big games and know how to navigate that. It was a brilliant game for the Cowboys.
Absolutely, it was a fantastic result for the Cowboys. And for me, I mean, just want to pick up on one thing you said, and not Spartacus and that particular show. We'll leave that one. We'll leave that one there. But you mentioned complementary football. And what I thought was interesting is that I think it was last weekend, obviously in the game against the Eagles, one podcast that I was listening to, or one article I read, I can't remember which one it was saying that, or asked the question, is Pickens now more important to the Cowboys than CD Lamb? Right? Because I think Pickens over the last couple of days, he's been outperforming Lamb in terms of yards, etc., etc. But this game was completely different, right? So CD Lamb had more receptions, he had more yards, he had obviously the touchdown, he had a long yard, so he was targeted less, right?
Yeah.
So he had 9 targets compared to Pickens, who had 13. But Lamb was more productive with those. So it shows that when you have multiple weapons, that the offense can thrive, and you're not always relying on one person all the time. And for me, the one thing I think that this showed for me is that this was just another, and I hate doing this because I hate, giving the Cowboys credit because I love seeing you depressed. But this was just another example that when the Cowboys' offense is healthy and it's clicking and it's on form, it can outduel an elite quarterback.
Yeah.
Right. Which is exactly what it did in this last weekend. And look, you talk about the game. I want to talk about what this does to the playoff picture.
Yeah.
This gives you guys more renewed confidence. That's 2 wins on the bounce. And these are 2 games. If we were talking back in sort of, October time, I said, look, you've got back-to-back games against the Eagles and the Chiefs. You would not put any money on you winning any of those games.
No, I put this as a loss. Remember, from the start of the season, I was like, Chiefs game definitely lost. Let's move on.
Absolutely, but you're playing both teams at a good time. Both teams are obviously not on the best of form, and you played the last season's Super Bowl contenders, and you beat both of them.
Yeah,
right. And these weren't lucky games. Yeah, these were games that you deserve the win. So the question I want to ask again, let's sit with the Cowboys before we move on to the Chiefs. How do you think you guys are still realistically within a playoff position? Because looking at the NFL website, you guys are still on the bubble. You've now got over the 0.5 win ratio. So you're on currently a 6-5-1 record. That one always annoys me. But 6-5-1. You're currently 9th in the NFC seeding, right? Yeah. 1 place behind the Lions and the 49ers, who are 7-1. You're still are quite a few games back from that sort of 7th seed. So the 49ers, as I mentioned, they are 7th seed. They're currently at 9-4, and they're 3rd in the NFC West. So you still got a few games to catch up. But this gives you momentum. Do you think you're still in the shouts, or do you think it's still a long way to go?
Listen, I could make an outrageous claim right now, and I could say that
that's not like you.
Not only will we get into the playoffs, we could win the division, right? And that would be an outrageous claim, and it's one that mathematically is possible if the Eagles are trending in the way that they're going, and if they repeat what they did in 2023. But realistically, I think we need a lot of things to bounce, our way, for us to, get into because we could still win out. If you look at the games that we've got to play right now, I think the most important game right now for us in terms of getting into the playoffs is the Lions, right? Because we've lost against the Panthers, we lost against the Bears. Now the Bears are already showing themselves to be a class above, everyone in the NFC. The Lions are also, we're catching them also as a not so great time for them. So I think that this next game on Thursday is probably the biggest game, for the Cowboys, because I think that this is the team that you can pull back, into where you are, and you can almost step ahead of them. And because obviously you've got the Panthers, who are also in the mix as well, and they've got a tie break against the Cowboys, and they're also doing very well. So, if the Panthers are getting in because they didn't win their division, obviously we've got the Bucs there, and the Bucs have started getting some of their players back, so they can get hot and go on the run. So these are the teams that could stop the Cowboys from getting in, because I'm not quite sure if 3 teams are coming out from the West. I think you can almost say that. And there's a potential that there's at least 2 teams coming out from the North.
Yeah.
Then that lot just leaves one place, that the Cowboys have to fight with so many teams to get in. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for the Cowboys to get in. There's no question about that. But all you can do is keep winning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the NFL the NFL website has your player probability at 16%. The Eagles at 95%. Yeah. So you are 2 games behind the Eagles, because they're currently, what are they?
8.5 because of the tie.
Yeah. Okay, and a half. Sorry, but they're 8-4, right? Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem I think you'll have is just I just think you're going to run out of games, and the Eagles are playing poorly, right? But they've got 5 games left.
Yes.
They've got to play the Chargers away.
Yeah.
Tough.
Tough.
But then they've got the Raiders and they've got the Commanders twice.
Yeah.
And the Bills. So they should be picking up at least 3 victories in that. A weakened Commanders team got to play twice, divisional game. But I know it's tough, but the Commanders haven't really been in any good shape this season. And nor of the Raiders. But, look, the one thing we have seen is the NFL is going to throw shocks up, and we'll talk about it. But there's only 5 games. You've got 5 games to make up 2. Right. So I think it's going to be tough. But as we're talking about that, right, I want to come back to the Chiefs because we'll talk about the AFC sort of later in the show. But as we're talking about the Eagles, let's talk again about the Eagles. I know you love talking about the Eagles, especially after they lose. So they had another disappointing, shall we say? Well, I said we say disappointing performance. Let's be fair. They have played. They lost 15-24 to probably one of the informed teams, or maybe the surprise package again. We have to keep saying surprise package of the season in the Chicago Bears, who are now the number 1 seed in the NFC. But saying that, this is a game that Eagles fans especially would think this is a game they should be winning, right? They're at home. They're coming off a really bad performance against the Cowboys, bad defeat, certainly against the Cowboys. They had to try and get at this. They could have made a statement with this game, but instead, they're now on a losing streak of 2 games, and you have a resurgent Cowboys behind them. I mean, obviously, I know you wouldn't have paid too much attention to this, but what was your overall thoughts on this one?
Listen, we've said this so many times. The Eagles have been looking ugly for a long time, right? And they have been putting on makeup, and just, getting by. And at some point, it was always going to come back to bite them, because the problem with December football is that, teams have worked out what exactly they are. And we always used to say that after Thanksgiving, you are who you are, right? Your record is not phantom. Whatever you are is what you are. And if you look at the way that the NFL has always been, season after season, you have teams that work out their problems across the season. So the first couple of games, maybe they're bad defensively, maybe their offense is not clicking, but you can start to see, certain improvement. Maybe they lose a game, by a field goal, right? But the offense played great, and it was just a case of, who had the last possession. The team had the last possession, block field goal, something, ridiculous in the special teams. But then that team gets confident that they are fixing the problems that they have. For the Eagles, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like any of their problems are getting fixed, from game to game, right? They look like they're either staying the same or they're getting worse. Their running game not getting any better. Saquon Barkley is not moving as quickly as he has ever done. It's like he's running on quicksand, in the last couple of games, right?
Yeah, 13 carries, 56 yards. I mean, we're going to talk about. I mean, sorry to interject there, but I think you talk about Barkley, and I think that's the key. Yeah. This is where the Bears, they won this on the ground, didn't they? I mean, they absolutely did. I mean, see if I can find the stats here. Yeah, I can't pronounce it. Kyle Manangi, 130 yards. DeAndre Swift, 125 yards. Yeah. So they combined for 281 yards, and it's the first time since 1985. So since I've been alive, right, 1985, that the Bears have had 2 rushers top 100 yards in a game.
Yeah,
which is an amazing stat.
That's crazy. And the funny thing about it, DeAndre Swift was an Eagles. He was an Eagles, just last season, went over to the Bears. So this was kind of a revenge game, for him to go to the Eagles and absolutely just show them, what they're losing by letting him go. But, like I was saying, that the Eagles, the things that they're supposed to be doing well, they're not. From a passing perspective, you get a few sightings of A.J. Brown. But then afterwards, they forget about him, So maybe you see him in the first couple of quarters, first plays in the first quarter, and then after that, he disappears. Not enough balance in this And then Jalen Hurts, right? You know how I feel about him. I've never really,
Love the guy. You love the guy. Love the guy.
never really, really rated him. And I know he's had a Super Bowl and all of that. You can't argue about that. But, this is a guy that constantly has time in the pocket, right? It's not like as if he's constantly running for his life, but still can't seem to be making the plays that he needs to play. And then the Eagles defense will keep giving them opportunity after opportunity to get back, on the field, but then they don't. So when they get back, they don't make, there were so many 3 and outs. It's ridiculous. I've not looked at the stats, but I am sure that the Eagles are probably in the top 3 of teams that have 3 and outs, in the NFL right now, because you almost like you see for like the whole second quarter, it was like get on the field, 3 and out, get back out. Get on the field, 3 and out, get back out. So the Eagles they need to fix their problems, and they need to fix it quick, because every single team that they play from here on is either going to be desperate or is going to play spoilers. And you look at the Chargers, right? That game that they're going to go to play now away from home. The Chargers potentially might not have Justin Herbert, because supposedly he might have an injury, but Trey Lance might be coming in to play that game. So that gives them a bit of a chance. But if the Eagles lose to the Chargers, I think we're now fully talking about them on the slide.
Oh, I think for certain. I mean, you talk about, third down. They were 4 for 12 on their third down efficiency, which and they even got even fumbled on a tush push, right? So even when that's not going right, things are not going right, and the crowd were getting restless. Fans were booing them. City brotherly love my ass. They were boot the fans. They were leaving early. So does that showing sign of resentment already there? Because this has been an ugly season for them. They're Super Bowl champs. They, people thought they'd kick on, and I think the fact that what Kansas City have done over the past couple of years, and I think the next Super Bowl winner thought, yes, we can now build a dynasty, and it just shows that isn't easy to do. But yeah, I mean, but the Bears march on, right? Fantastic victory for them. Their number 1 seed. But again, I find it interesting, even at a number 1 seed, their playoff probability is only 76%. So that's still like one of the lowest in there. And the reason why is because they're in such a competitive NFC North.
Yeah.
And let's just touch on that next, because there was obviously a massive divisional game in the NFC North with the Green Bay Packers beating the Detroit Lions. And for me, this was almost, I don't want to say breakout, because obviously, he's been a good quarterback for a while, but Jordan Love was the star of this game. Right. Let's have a look. He was 18 out of 30. So, not particularly the most efficient, but 234 yards, 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. That's matched his career high for touchdowns in a game. This was a big momentum shift for that. Beating the divisional rivals. You had the Bears winning. So the Bears have obviously on a winning streak of 5. Packers are now a winning streak of 3. It's so tight in that division. There's still and given how competitively NFC West is, it looks like it's going to be 2 of 3. So this was a big, big game for Green Bay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I just think of whoop ass. This is what this game was about. The Packers absolutely put a whooping, on the Lions. And there is nothing as terrible as having teams that you're supposed to know very well, understand how they play, and then they come in and they say, no, sorry, you are not going to do what you want to do in this game. We are going to take over. And that the Green Bay Packers have got one eye on the Super Bowl. There is no question about it. What they've done in the offseason, the players that they've recruited, what they've been doing steadily week on week, the defense closing out games, Micah Parsons closing out games, coming with a sack. He had 2.5 sacks in 2 consecutive games. Micah Parsons, is showing and this is what is going to be the problem, because when I look at everybody else, you've got to say that the weapons that the Green Bay have in their defense can be a match for anybody else in the NFC. And Jordan Love, if he plays the way that he's just played in this game, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, efficient with the ball, letting the running game do what they're supposed to do, play situational football, don't make mistakes, all those things like pre-snap penalties and all of those nonsense. If they play clean football, right, they're going to be a problem. Now, obviously, the Bears have jumped out in front, right, because they don't seem to know how to lose, right? They've just ripped out, was it 8 straight wins, right?
Right.
I think they lost to the Rams somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's five. The Bears are 5 straight.
5 straight. But they're going to be fancying themselves, right, with the record that they have now. So it's now going to be a straight fight, because I think that out of all the 3 teams, the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears, 2 teams are trending up. 1 team is trending downwards, and that's the Lions.
Yeah, I think it might be hard to say that they're trending downwards. I think that, look, they still got a 7-5 record. They're winning. Their losing streak counts at 1, right? So this isn't like this isn't terminal yet, and they're still very much in the shout. And if it wasn't for the NFC West, I think there's a potential that all 3 teams could be challenging for the playoffs, but that's obviously not going to happen. I think for me, they were just a bit sloppy on execution. And I think the biggest differentiator, just how aggressive the Packers were. You talk about how aggressive they were in the rush defense, with Parsons again getting 2.5 sacks. But Green Bay went for it on 4th down. They were 3 for 3 on 4th down attempts, whereas the Lions 0 and 2. They just couldn't get it done. So I think there was such differentiator was the aggression that the Packers were showing. And, as you said, they want this playoff place. They want to be at that Super Bowl.
Yeah. And the thing for me about the Lions is that, we saw them go toe to toe with the Giants, right? And I don't think there's anyone that's looking at the Giants and thinking they're a good team, right? They barely won that game, against the Giants. That game went to overtime. And it took, an unbelievable performance from Jahmyr Gibbs, for them to win that game. Now, if you've got a defense that is giving up points like that, right? If you look at the teams that they've got to play, right? So the Lions have got to play the Dallas Cowboys, and then they've got to play the LA Rams, right? So these are 2 teams that offensively can punish you, right? So this thing could be over in another 2 games, for the Lions. And then now they've got, a game against Pittsburgh, Minnesota, and then they've got Chicago, right? Now, you could say that final game of the season against Chicago may already be in, and so may decide to rest their starters. But the Lions have got to win their next 2 games if they need to have a shout, because after that, it starts becoming very dicey. And their form, if you look at it, right, they've been doing win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. So that's the exact definition of, inconsistent. So you don't know, what team is going to show up, at every game. And the games that, they've lost, it's been ugly, right? They lost to the Vikings, lost to the Eagles. Now they've lost to Green Bay Packers. So that's why I worry for the Lions. I think overall, if we just kind of, take big picture and you look at the NFC sort of playoffs, you could probably say that there are a couple of teams that maybe they're a lock right now, to get into the playoffs, right? You probably look at, the Rams and you probably say they're a lock to get in somehow, right? Then you look at the Seahawks, the way the Seahawks have been playing as well, and you kind of think to yourself, the Seahawks are probably a shoo-in to get into the playoffs. But for me, those are the 2 teams that are absolutely certain that, people are can say, well, I'm going to put my money on that. Now, the Bears, right? Everyone has got this thing about the Bears that you don't know exactly what you're seeing, whether this is fool's gold or is really legit. But I have a feeling that this is legit. And I don't potentially see the Bears losing too many games, in the next couple of games. Because if I look at the Bears, what they've got, right? They've got a tough game against Green Bay Packers, and this is the big one. It is the big one because they need to win this game. If they win this game, but let's say they split with Green Bay because they are playing them in quick succession. So they play the Green Bay Packers, go play the Cleveland Browns, who you would think that they would win that game, considering who Cleveland Brown is right now, and what the struggles that they're going to. And then they come again, and then they play Green Bay Packers. And then they play the San Francisco 49ers, and then they play the Detroit Lions. So they've got a tough game, but it seems like they've got the momentum to actually just keep going. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I think that week on week, the NFC picture is going to be changing.
Yeah, well, let's. You mentioned a couple of teams there, so let's move on to the NFC West. And we said for the last couple of weeks we think that the NFC champions are probably going to come from the NFC West. But yeah, and it was certainly an interesting an interesting few results for in this division, especially the Rams, who sort of lost that 5-game winning streak that they had in a surprising defeat to, again, a team who have done very well this season in the NFC, and the Carolina Panthers. So this was, I think this was a warning shot, or let's say a bolt, a kick up the arse for the Rams, saying they can't walk it, right? We've talked about Stafford. He was coming on an absolute prolific streak. He hadn't thrown a interception since week 4. But here he threw 2 interceptions, one of which was a pick 6, which is a big momentum swing. He lost a fumble, right? So but despite that, the Rams offense still performed. They still actually played pretty well. Mistakes cost them.
Yeah.
And this is the thing they're going to have to learn going into the playoffs, is that you can have a game like this in the regular season. But if you have a game like that in the playoffs, you go home, right?
Yeah.
So this will be a massive, massive kick for them, because I don't think anybody saw this coming. And with the Seahawks walking all over the Vikings and the 49ers winning, it just keeps cranking. That pressure is just sort of cranked up a little bit on the Rams. They've lost that number 1 seeding to the Bears, as we've talked about. They are still more or less a lock for the playoffs, but this was a bit of a wake-up call, wasn't it?
It was a wake-up call. And you know what? I think the Rams are not going to panic. They're gonna look at this game and they think, yeah, we lost the turnover battle. And you know what they say about when you lose the turnover battle, you usually lose the game. So like you said, their offense still was functional, still did a lot of good things. And listen, the game was very close. It wasn't like as if, with the turnovers that the Panthers were blowing out the Rams, So you kind of look at that game and you kind of think, okay, if they didn't, have those turnovers, what could the game be? I mean, it was 28-31, right? So you take away, at least one of those turnovers, and the Rams could have won this game, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that it was a sort of awakening kind of game. You cannot rest on your laurels because teams are desperate, at this time of the season. So you've got to play mistake-free football to ensure that you get in. So I don't think this is something to panic for the Rams. It's probably more a reflection of the Panthers. Mm-hmm. What they've done, to their season, because I don't think anyone would have expected the Panthers to have this sort of record at this time.
No, not at all. No one would have thought after Thanksgiving that Panthers would be 7-6, only a game off the Bucs, so who are top of that division and 7-5. So, they're going into their bye week, bit of momentum. Bryce Young, again, a former number 1 pick, and we've talked about number 1 picks and the pressure on rookie QBs, and sometimes it takes time. I think Bryce Young did well. He showed a lot of sort of poise under pressure. He needs to be sized, and he came up and delivered when it was needed. So fair play to Carolina. We haven't really touched too much on the NFC South, but I mean, just to give you an idea, in the NFC South, you've got the Bucs 7-5, Panthers 7-6, and it's really they're the only two teams in it. The Falcons and the Saints are both out, and it's going to be a straight shoot. Realistically, it's going to be a straight shoot between the Bucs and the Panthers to see one of those guys gets playoffs.
And guess what? They play each other twice before the
absolutely.
end.
It's going to it's going to be massive. And the Bucs obviously picked up a win. They've had a bit of a wobble recently, which has allowed the Carolina to to stay in touch. And that's going to be really interesting. But I think you're looking at the 4th seed right there. But so let's leave the NFC right there. I mean, I think we've covered most of the key points. And just to look at the playoff picture, just to confirm, you've got the Bears 1, Rams 2, Eagles 3, Bucks 4. Then you've got Seahawks, Packers, and 49ers who sort of make up the top 7 as it is. But let's go over and look at the AFC. And obviously, we would normally start with an amazing victory for the Miami Dolphins, as you'd expect, against a really great New Orleans Saints team, despite the fact that we actually let the Saints, pick up an onside kick in the last minutes and almost threw the game away. But never mind. We won't talk about the Dolphins anymore. Let's talk about stuff that actually matters. The Patriots, obviously, we're recording this before the Patriots play Monday Night Football. So we don't know how that's going on. But let's start at the top. Let's look at the Broncos. And I'm just trying to get the Broncos score up because they picked up a win, didn't they, this weekend?
Another classic Chiefs, kind of win. The Broncos are fast becoming like the Chiefs of last season. Last minute, 4th quarter, heroics and miracles. So you keep thinking, when is the juice gonna fall out? When is the juice gonna dry up? Right? Because it's just you cannot. You don't know how sustainable this style of winning football is. The Bucks played the Commanders, and this is what we're talking about. The Commanders, without Jaden Daniels, with Mariota, as quarterback, and he was, still, wheeling and dealing, in this game. But the Bucks just found a way to win. They found a way to win this game. And it's a reflection of a lot of their wins this season. 4th quarter, sneaking in, down by so many points and then just jumping in the last couple of minutes and just winning the game. And it's again, you look at them and, that's a very interesting, conference right now, because we started off with the Colts, blowing everybody away.
Oh, we'll come on to the Colts. Yeah, we'll come on to the Colts in a bit.
And then now you've got the Broncos, and you've got to say, Sean Payton, as a Super Bowl winning coach, that has got to give some credit, and teams are going to be worried, right? The Broncos wouldn't have thought that at this time of the season, they will be 4 points better than the Chiefs, right? 4 points better than, as in 4 games better than the Chiefs. And I say that, and I still don't believe it, right? And if you woke somebody who has just been sleeping for half of the year and just say the Broncos are 4 games ahead of the Chiefs, they're probably going to be like, just put me back in the coma, because this is not the real world. And in that division right now, the only people that could potentially catch them is the Chargers. So yeah, it's all very interesting, and well done to the Broncos. They're going to be a tough team to get past when they get into the playoffs, because I think you can safely say that they're going to be in the playoffs right now.
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, I think it's just worth touching on exactly how this game finished, because this was so close, right? So the game was decided in overtime, as you mentioned, but there was a bit of the sequence was, say, dramatic in terms of how it actually ended. So, Denver's first possession, 5-yard run, touchdown. That was great. Commanders then responded with a touchdown themselves, but they went for the 2-point attempt.
Yeah.
And it was batted down, game over, right? So, you give Commanders credit for being aggressive and going for it. They just couldn't convert. Now, if you look at, sort of what this means for, for the narrative, this showed a different side to the Broncos, so this, for me, it shows that they've got the sort of, what's a difference. So it shows they've got sort of mental toughness to them, and they can win out these close games, and they can be disciplined in tough situations. And they're 10-2 for a reason.
Yeah.
I would say that the AFC is probably looking at a weaker conference than the NFC at the moment. I think it's fair to say, but they are number one seeds for a reason. They are winning these tight games. And are they going to 1-0 to the Arsenal it all the way to the Super Bowl? Quite possibly. But you need that mental toughness. You need that discipline. You need that to actually go and win the Super Bowl. So, fair play to them. Washington, to give them credit, their season is over, but they put them under pressure. So let's move to the team who are now. You mentioned the Colts, so let's look at the Colts. Now, it wasn't that long ago, as you said, they were blowing teams away. Did they go 7-0 and then sort of 8-1 or whatever it is? They've lost their last two, right? They are now 8-4, and they are now second in the AFC South. They got replaced by the Jaguars. So the Colts lost once again, and they lost to the Texans. And we're going to talk about predictions later, but fair play. You called this. The Texans actually turned up. They shut them down, and the Texans are on great run of form, and the Colts really aren't. If you look at that division now, so you've gone from Colts being runaway leaders, of that division. They're now second, but they're only one ahead of the Texans themselves, who are 7-5. The AFC South has really sort of lit up in the last couple of weeks, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It has lit up, and the Colts, maybe they picked too early. I mean, I still think that they can arrest their slide, but they're playing their very next game is for the team that is looking to overthrow them. So the next game is the most important game for the Colts because they play the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? They'll win that game, and then they can start to feel a little bit better about the postseason, because now all they need to do is just, match what Jacksonville Jaguar does for the rest of the season. And then they know that they've got, that tie break. And they're potentially playing the Jaguars, at the end of the season as well. So they don't have an easy run. Actually, their next couple of games, looks really brutal. So they've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, then they play the Seattle Seahawks, then they play the San Francisco 49ers, then back to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then the Houston Texans. And so this could be one of the stories of the season where a team that was starting, going into Thanksgiving, where hovering over being the number one seed in the AFC to missing out in the playoffs. Is that possible?
It is. In this division, it absolutely is. This is a proper wake up call. And Daniel Jones playing for an injury, 2 touchdowns, but it was the running back who's been their sort of star player this season. Again, didn't break 100 yards again. It was 85 yards, 21 carries, didn't score. The ground game was blunted. Again, the Texans defense has really came up, and what they did is the Texans did a really good job of, converting their third downs, eating up the clock, being disciplined. And, these divisional games, they're hardly ever blowouts. It's about being disciplined and, being efficient and making those things. And the Texans just did that better than the Colts in this week. So we talked about those two teams. Now let's move on to the team who are now top of that group and are, again, kind of out from nowhere, really. And this is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who they came up against the Tennessee Titans. So you would have thought that should be a win in the bank anyway. But 25-3, right? So they put in a dominant performance. Lawrence Taylor, again, looked good. No interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Now, they're now top of that division. Do you see them going to the playoffs, or do you think Texans? And one thing that's actually worth mentioning about the Texans, actually, I forgot to mention, CJ Stroud was back as quarterback.
He was back in, yes.
So that's a massive boost for them as well. But Jacksonville currently top of division, so let's give them credit. How do you think they're looking at the moment?
I mean, the Texans are in a difficult position, just a bit like the Cowboys, right?
Bring it back to the Cowboys. Bring it back to the Cowboys.
They have got to, right? They've just got to get over this next game, right? Which, spoiler alert, would be very interesting. So I'm not going to break that because that's going to be one of our, prediction games. But they've got the Kansas City Chiefs. And then after that, you think that their schedule gets a little bit softer. They play the Cardinals, they play the Raiders. And then they play the Chargers and the Colts to finish things up. Now, the only way that they can get in, I think, is they have to win that division. I think that's the way for the Texans to get in. Now, in order for them to do that, they have to replace, either the Colts or they replace the Buffalo Bills, right? And that's going to be tough. That's going to be really, really tough, for them to do that, especially with the way Jacksonville Jaguars are playing, a way that the Colts will probably not want to let this slip. So I think it's very tough for them, but I think their next game is going to be key, because if they win that next game, they're in with a shout, right? They're in with a shout because then they've got 2 games while the Colts and the Jaguars are playing difficult games. In those 2 games, they've got a softer schedule that they can pile up some wins. So by the time they get to the other side of those 2 games after this game, they could genuinely be believed in the Texans that they could steal that division, from the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Colts. But the next game is the most important game for the Texans.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But that looks like such a tight division. I think it's going to be lots of eyes in the AFC South. It's 3 teams with a winning record. But let's move on to a division that's got no teams with a winning record. Let's look at the AFC North, because, my God, I mean, such an odd division, the AFC North. So you've got the Ravens are sitting at the top of that division, followed by the Steelers. They're both on 6-6, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why the Ravens are at 6-6 is because they lost to the Cincinnati Bengals, which again would have been a surprise performance. But Joe Burrow is back for this one, wasn't he?
He was back for this one
and made such a difference. So the Bengals won out 32-14, sorry. And the funny thing about this, we were saying before, and I openly said that if I was the Bengals, I would just be, look, leave Burrows, the season's over.
Yeah.
They were 3-8 at the time, or 3-7 at the time.
3-7, yeah.
Yeah, but now, I mean, they're still 4-8. Okay, well, if you're a team on 4-8 going into Thanksgiving, the chance of you getting to playoffs is slim. However, the 2 teams above them are only 6-6. The Bengals could still make this playoffs. They're going to have to win the division, right? But they're still in this. This game has sort of blew things wide open, and the fact that Burrow's come back, looked healthy, threw for 2 touchdowns of 161 yards. Yeah, they dominated them.
Every game is going to be real interesting, because especially Joe Burrow coming back into the picture, that changes things, right? And the way that division looks very, very shaky. And we've seen the Steelers play, and you saw the Steelers against the Bills, and you kind of think to yourself, yeah, I don't know if that team is capable. Offensively, they don't look very good. It's got a good defense, but at some point you've got to score points. And if you're not scoring points, you're going to meet a team that is very happy to score points on you. And there's only so much your defense can do. And so for me, I look at the Steelers and I think, ooh, the Bengals are kind of thinking to themselves, saying, "Hey, listen, we're 4-8, but watch us. Joe Burrow is back, right?" And then you look at the games that they've got to play. The real difficult one is the next one. They play against the Bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can they win that game? If they win that game, look out, because Joe, Joe could be about to do something that only Tom Brady did when he was at the box.
Yeah. Well, I think it certainly opened up that division. And for me, looking at the Ravens, I mean, the turnovers killed them. Absolutely killed them. I mean, well, whilst Burrows provided the Bengals with poise and steadiness, it all went wrong for the for the Ravens, didn't it? 5 turnovers, multiple fumbles, and a pick. They just keep giving the Bengals the ball back. There aren't many quarterbacks, worse than Joe Burrow. You want to keep giving the ball back to, and hey, it's really opened up. I mean, I don't think any of these teams are going to. Whoever gets into the playoffs, and there's only going to be one. I can't see them going far unless Ravens really do book up their ideas. But yeah, this was a poor game, but for the Ravens. But let's move on to the next one. Where should we move on to next? As I said, the AFC East. The Patriots obviously are playing tonight. But you mentioned this game already, so let's touch on the Bills and the Steelers. The Bills won this one. Steelers, again, as you said, aren't looking great. But the Bills obviously came in. They got the job done, didn't they?
They did. They did. Got the job done. And honestly, at this time of the season, it's about getting the job done.
Absolutely.
There's no style points. There's nothing like that. You just get in, and you just win. And December is always very important. For a lot of teams, because the reality is that and it's very obvious to say, but you don't have a lot of games after December, right? By the time you're halfway in December, you've played pretty much most of the games that are left in the NFL. So at this time, all you're doing is, I don't want injuries. You don't want injuries to key players, and you just want to keep winning. So yeah, they've done what they needed to do. You can't say that they've had an immaculate season. I don't think that there's anybody going to be talking about MVP, from that side of the aisle. But you just need to win. Just win and get in. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, traditionally the Chiefs has been the obstacle for a lot of teams, in the AFC. And you've got a season where the Chiefs are most likely not to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take advantage of that, because there won't be two seasons like this.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's go full circle and let's end this week on the Chiefs. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the game too much, but we started with the Cowboys Chiefs. So let's end with the Cowboys and Chiefs, but let's look at it from the Chiefs' perspective, because this is a team. They're now 6-6. Right, they are third in the AFC West. Obviously, 4 games behind the Broncos, but 2 games behind the Chargers, and Chargers look like a better football team at the moment. The Chiefs are currently 10th, right, in the Super Bowl, the AFC kind of seedings for the playoffs. But they have to go some way to catch up to, say, like the Bills, who are currently 7th. And I said at the beginning of the season, my shock snap judgment was the Chiefs would be one and done. Mm-hmm. They don't even look like they're going to be one and done at the moment. Do you think? I mean, again, I've talked about this playoff probability. They're somehow still got a 30%, I can't get my words out now. 37% chance of getting into playoffs. That seems very ambitious. Would you not say? Do we not think their season's nearly over?
It is. And I think, 27 of that percentage is based on history.
that's fair. That's fair.
I think there is a lot of people who are like, it's the Chiefs, can't count them out. You just feel like as if this lightning going to strike you if you start talking, about the Chiefs not making into the playoffs. And, such has been the success of this team that people, squeezing themselves, twisting themselves into pretzels, trying not to say that the Chiefs are done, that they're not going to make the playoff because everyone is too scared. They've seen this movie before. They've seen the Chiefs do incredible things that no other team is capable of doing. They've seen Patrick Mahomes, come out of a sack. People are trying to chase him. He's wiveled up through 20 players, and got into the end zone. You've seen all of these things where, he's falling to the ground and he throws the ball off. Kelsey catches it and it's touchdown. We've seen all these things that are not humanly possible for people to do. And then people are like, it's the Chiefs, it's the Chiefs. I look at the record, but I have to ignore the record and think about the Chiefs. The Chiefs have got some problems. They do. And when you watch them closely, you can see what's going on. They're now becoming a team with a lot of penalties. In that Cowboys game, they gave up a lot of penalties, a lot of first down through penalties in the Cowboys game. They are not affecting the the quarterback as much as they used to do. This was always the thing. You wait for that Chris Jones, sack to come in and disrupt, the game. That hasn't been happening. And then, their offensive line hasn't been keeping Mahomes upright. And this team functions because of Patrick Mahomes, because of what Patrick Mahomes is able to do. And every quarterback, we talk about this all the time. If you hit a quarterback so many times, he becomes normal, right? Mm-hmm. Every quarterback in the league, nobody wants to be hit by 200, 300-pound men, running at you at, 70 miles per hour, right? So you get hit a couple of times, it starts to affect you. You start to throw quickly because you don't want to get hit, right? So if the Chiefs don't fix the offensive line, and I heard Patrick Mahomes, talk about in the post game after the Cowboys, now they've got to win every single game, and this Absolutely. Is not something that usually was Aaron Rodgers that says this thing. We're going to run the table. I remember him doing that when he was in Green Bay, and they did run the table. And Andy Reid, also gave a press conference, earlier on, yesterday, or was it earlier on today, and he was saying something about tickling people's tonsils by what the Chiefs are going to do, which I don't know what that expression means.
No, that sounds like something from Spartacus again.
It might have been. Andy Reid has been watching Spartacus.
No, I bet he is a dirty best. But no, look, I think you're right. But look, I tell you what, let's end this week. I want to bring in a new feature, which I'm just going to throw in here every week. This is almost a little snap judgment. I want you to tell me who the Super Bowl is going to be, right? Based on where we are so far. So basically, who is going to be the NFC and AFC? So I'll go, bro. I'll give you a bit of thinking time. Yeah. So for me, I'm putting my Week 13 money on the Bills and the Rams.
Okay, I like that. I like that, but I got one better. I got one better. Of course.
Okay. We know how good your predictions have been, Eddie.
Yes, they've been terrible. But who's counting anyway?
So we've got a whole series dedicated to Eddie. Someone's counting. Somebody's counting.
Somebody's counting. I want to go, the return of the good old days, right? Patriots coming out from the AFC, and Patriots. I'm going to go Patriots, and I'm going to go Packers. Patriots and Packers in the
wow. So I've gone for double B's. You've gone for double P's. There we go.
Double P's.
No, actually, what went to double B's? I went for the Rams, didn't I? Tell you what, I can't even. My whole thing didn't even make sense. But anyway, what a good way to end. Hey, both those games would be fantastic if they came off, wouldn't they? But let's leave it there for there. We did say when we started, before we jumped on, said let's try and keep this a half an hour. We are now 59 minutes in. So if you can, in the next sort of 20 seconds, Eddie, take us home.
Right. So I'm going to be loving the NFL from now on because every single game feels like they matter, especially for a lot of teams that are sitting in a bubble, my team inclusive. But other teams who have just cut the slide at the wrong possible time in the season, and they are looking for their, should I say, studs on their shoes, something to break the fall, and they're not finding it very quickly. So, but what we do want you guys to do is to hit that like and subscribe button, guys. We do appreciate all of you that watch the show, but we do want to keep growing. So hit the like and subscribe button. Share this with as many people as possible, right? Talk about this to crazy Brit guys talking about the NFL game, and also stay tuned for our predictions for week 14. So look out for the video for that, and you just don't know what we might be doing in that section and where I am. It seems, I could be, this might be the weekend that I actually, take Matt down, but you're gonna have to watch that video to find out. Until then, see you in the next Cross the Gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the